we can turn the microphones on. I believe we are live. If everything is fine, there is sound because I've seen something on the channel about you guys not hearing us. Please let us know if there is an issue. Nicholas is our Chief of Staff here at OP Noobs. I'm Frederick, CEO of OP Noobs, and we are joined together with Brad Cook of Out of the Parks Developments, Zeno Zokalj from Starpoint Gemini 2, and Simon Dean of Folktale, and Chris Rubyor Christopher Rubyor of Signal Studios Savage Lands. Chris, do you go by Chris?
Chris or Christopher? Chris, yes. Chris is fine.
Wonderful. Nicholas is here to accompany me in the very first roundtable for Rise of the Indie. We're going into our season premiere. This is going to be about a 6 months focus with developers, talking about the indie scene, focusing on some of the big questions we have, and also zooming in on some of the phenomena we've seen. I'm going to start by a quick round of introductions, presentations, starting with you, Brad. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and of course about Out of the Parks Baseball.
Yeah, I'm Brad Cook, the PR marketing manager for Out of the Park Baseball, as well as MLB Manager, our game on iOS and Android. And I've been with the company since January 2011. I work from home in Northern California. The company's actually based out of Hamburg, Germany. I'm actually the only American with the company. We've got a hockey game as well as a football game that's in development. Everyone else is in Canada or Europe. And that's pretty much it. We're just we're coming on 16 years now of the game.
Wonderful. Yeah, it has a long history and a lot of followers behind that game. We've done an interview. Check it out on opnoobs.com. You'll find it under the interviews section. Simon, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah. So my name is Simon Dean. I am a producer at Games Foundry. We're working on Folktale, which is in Steam Early Access. I am based in the UK, but the rest of the team are spread around the world. So UK, Canada, Sweden, Slovenia. I first got into the industry, let me think, 1997, when we got signed by Electronic Arts on a title called Beasts and Bumpkins, which I co-created. And then I dived back into the industry sort of 2010. And not long after started working on Folktale.
Wonderful. We're thankful to have you, so thanks for joining us. Chris Rubyor, you also have a very interesting career.
Yeah, I'm Chris. I currently work at Signal Studios as the studio design director. I oversee the creation of new IP for our digital portfolio. As well, I was the design director and creative visionary for Savage Lands, which we just recently released into early access back in March. I started back in the industry in 1994, right out of high school. One of the first games I worked on was Lion King for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And then I worked for a studio at the time called Westwood Studios, the guys behind Command and Conquer. So I was part of that team up until about 2003, where I went to Electronic Arts, worked on Lord of the Rings, Battle of Middle-earth, went back to a small developer, Petroglyph, worked on Empire at War, a Star Wars game, and then went on to work at Microsoft, where I worked in the digital portfolio of games, working on a variety of different titles ranging from Trials to Minecraft, and as well as the Toy Soldiers franchise, where today, now I've kind of got out of the publishing thing, went back to more of the indie development where I reside today at Signal. So
yeah, cool. So you bring in a breadth of experience, and we're very curious to see your views on the AAA scene and how it connects to the indie scene, but we'll get to that later. Before we move to the big questions, the great Zeno of Starpoint Gemini 2, which we just had the chance of interviewing a few days ago. Zeno, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Zeno Žokalj. I'm community and PR manager in Little Green Man Game Studio, and I'm responsible for media relations, community on Steam, Good Old Games, and official forums, along with Facebook and Twitter pages. And my gaming career started back in 1986 on Spectrum, and continued on my favorite Amiga 1200 and later PC. And in Little Green Man Games, I started firstly as a design advisor and beta tester, and joined the team in November last year.
Wonderful. And Starpoint Gemini? Starpoint Gemini 2?
Starpoint Gemini 2 is a tactical combat-oriented space simulation. Yeah, and it was in early access for a year, and it was released in September last year, and so far people and community are ecstatic with it.
So we're excited about today because today is we're bringing a mix of experiences and skill sets, different games, very different games, but all that pertain to the indie scene with their different stories. Some of them still in early starts, some of them already out, like Out of the Park Baseball 16. And we'd like to get your opinions, guys, on some of the big trends that have been going on for the past couple years, maybe even the past decades. This is, as I said, the first episode of this season of topics on the indie scene. So we'd like to get broad, but also stay broad, but also talk about maybe some of the main successes, the main issues, some of the history that led to the development, this boom in the indie scene. So we'll get straight to it. The way it's gonna work is pretty straightforward. We're gonna ask 9 questions in total, and we're gonna ask one of you guys to start by opening with some initial comments, some opening comments, and then we'll pass the microphone around and have the rest of you folks comment on whatever the issues the first person brought up. So the first question goes to Zeno Žokalj, Starpoint Gemini 2, and it's an initial question that we felt was important, because to understand the indie scene, it's important to understand the audience. Who are we targeting here? Who is the indie gamer? Is he somebody who plays AAA games just as much as anyone else, or is it somebody who actually might look at AAA games as something that's not for him and is really looking for a parallel universe for his gaming hobby? So the question is, which qualities, Zeno, do you think define the indie gamer, the artist and the developer of modern days? In other words, what might motivate the evolution of an industry which evades mainstream trends and dynamics?
Well, first of all, I think that most gamers want the same thing, and that is to play a good game. And a good game is good regardless of the genre. Unfortunately, many AAA titles are not good anymore compared to old AAA titles like, let's remember, Baldur's Gate, Half-Life, Unreal Tournament. And I think that is where the indie scene comes in. Indie developers offered gamers something new, fresh, innovative, and fun. And also, I wouldn't use the term indie gamer. I'm not an indie gamer. I love to play good games, both AAA and indie. I never woke up and decided that I will play only indie games from now on and never play AAA title again. And that might be a choice, but I would never deny myself a good game just because it's a AAA title. And for the other part of the question on indie developers, I think that they're more open than, let's call them, standard developers. More open to criticism, open to suggestions and ideas, more responsive and more active in communication with their players. And players respect that, and they give their support in return. And so far it's working, and indie industry is growing rapidly. First of all, that growth is based on mutual respect between developers and players, and also because good indie games are setting some new standards in indie industry, and also gaining good reputation and credibility based on those things I mentioned. So I think that is the motivation for this industry to go further.
Does anybody have a reaction to that?
Yeah, I would say that our community is similar too. I mean, we have a lot of pretty passionate fans, a pretty active forum. One of the things I do is I respond to people on our forum as well as on Steam and other places, and people seem to really appreciate that. I do see some complaints online from people who say, geez, you know, the bigger publishers don't even listen to me, and Marcus Heinzen, who created Out of the Park Baseball, you know, he always every year opens a thread for suggestions for next version of the game, and we'll pretty much take people's suggestions to heart. So I think that's definitely something that indie developers can do to you know, attract a loyal and passionate fan base that, you know, really big publishers don't have. I think big publishers have a more fickle customer base who may or may not stick around. They may just, you know, kind of punt and move on to someone else.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Brett, I think that your Metacritic score is speaking for itself. It's like 93% or something.
Right,
so.
right.
Yeah.
I'd like to, in regards to, you know, developers that on the traditional side as well as developers on the indie side, I believe they all want the same thing. They're very passionate about the products that they build. I just unfortunately think where indies are a little bit more agile, they can interact with their communities, you know, much more. A lot of traditional developers, and those are developers that still are shackled to publishers, don't have that ability to interact with the community as much as they'd like to, because often it's the publishers that take on the responsibility of doing that, and often publishers don't go as deep. And we're talking larger publishers like, you know, your Ubisofts and your Electronic Arts. And not saying that it's bad, but they often don't have that level of communication that a lot of indies do. So, you know, as we're... they're just machines. They're giant ships that are just very hard to turn, you know, in the waters. And eventually they're coming around. A lot of them are getting better at embracing the community, and interacting with their community and listening to their fans. But in essence, a lot of them, you know, there's still a little bit of that churn and burn mentality going on at publishers, where they, you know, they get the product out and they move on to the next thing. And, you know, sure, their communities might be complaining, but they want to, you know, they may get a couple patches out, but they want to get to the next product. They want to keep the revenue coming in. That is simply how, you know, that's just how they work. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, one of the initiatives we started early on at Westwood was community integration into everything that we do. We started embracing the community. We started bringing fans, and this is actually one of the things that I kind of helped pioneer back in those days. And as a developer, it helped me immensely to understand, you know, taking player feedback, working with the community, and trying to appeal to them. So that's one of the things now at Signal Studios, especially with the Savage Lands. If you go into our Steam forums, you'll see that you know, we're really active with our fans. I try to comment on every single review that's posted up about the game, thanking those individuals for writing a review, because they are taking the time out of their gaming schedule to post up a review. As good or as bad or as colorful as they may be, it's still, you know, it's still those individuals taking time to post up a review. So it's, you know, I think the tides in general, it's just things are slowly turning. I think publishers want to do it, and I know, because I have a lot of friends that are still in that traditional form of development that would love to do it, but they're just kind of limited by you know, by those publishing powers. Which I give it time. I'm sure that things will change, but it's, with most publishers, it's always a slow going process.
I just really echo some of what's been said. I think it's down to accessibility to the devs and a degree of accountability as well. I think games players really appreciate the fact that it's this unprecedented access to the developers, and the feeling that their feedback can in some way go towards improving and shaping the game, which you obviously don't get with AAAs. And I think in terms of accountability as well, in that you know, if you're doing something wrong as an indie, you're really accountable to your community, not to shareholders like the big publishers. And I think that that dynamic completely changes the relationship that indies can have with their players and what AAA have with their players. And I think, you know, the AAAs are trying to slowly come around. But like I said, they're big ships, and they take a long time to make a turn. But I think we'll see more of that. I think that's going to be interesting. But I think indies are definitely pioneering the way in that respect.
It's probably tougher for the big studios to adopt such a philosophy, the closeness to the community. But at the same time, one could argue they definitely have a budget to set up a department that would act that way. I know they do, but that, I guess, could act more effectively that way. Do you think the AAA studios are looking at the indie scene and perhaps thinking there's something we could learn that's happening right there? Because it's a pretty new phenomenon that's become even bigger with Kickstarters, crowdfunding, early access. All that is really bringing the developers closer to the community, and you guys are finding that the closer you are to the community, the more your game is gonna sell, if I'm correct. So do you think the AAA are looking at this and thinking maybe we need to do a lot more of that?
I think they're frightened a little bit. It's an unprecedented level of honesty and openness, which, you know, is not historically what they run by. I think indies are much more agile and able to respond to that. And I don't know if they'll ever catch up, because the indie scene's constantly going to be changing, and yeah, they may never catch up.
Most publishers have internal groups that manage community and as well as media relations and whatnot, but they are limited in what they can say, in you know, how they, you know, if there's a bug with the game, a lot of times they can't really come out and say, yeah, there's a problem. They usually find ways to sugarcoat everything, whereas indie developers, and like I tell everybody when I'm doing Savage streams or in our forums, I'm really transparent. I'll tell them, hey, look, yeah, there's a bug. I'm really sorry. We're looking into it and we're going to fix it right away. It's, you know, we're on it. Or if we slip, we try to do game updates every week, be it big or small. If we slip, I'll come out and say, look, sorry, the code team, big bugs, we had to fix some stuff or overhaul the AI. And oftentimes the players love that level of transparency. They love that communication that they have. And they'll often be like, no problem. And we'll see you guys next week. And it's as simple as that. But I think a lot of big publishers worry that they'll have this huge lashback, and you know, there's going to be this uprising outside the gates that they'll be storming in and taking over the company. Whereas with indies, you know, the beauty of being agile, but there is that the community is also very forgiving. You know, they understand, they want to be part of that experience, and they want it to be the best possible game. So they're willing to forgive when things don't always come together. It's a really cool thing, but. You know, publishers will get. I'm hoping they get there. I'm hoping they see it. You know, I've worked for many different publishers, so they want to be. They'll even set up groups to be. But it's, again, they're still hamstrung by how far they can really go.
I just wanted to add too. Ubisoft is at least vaguely attempting to do this a little bit with the between the Valiant Hearts team, and they have a couple of indies. They're probably the first larger company attempting this, but do you guys have any thoughts on the fact that, like, so for Ubisoft, for instance, they're attempting to do it now. They had Valiant Hearts, and I think they have 2 or 3 other that they're considering indie teams, which is literally like 4 or 5 people still under the branch. Do you think you still would be able to have the agility that an indie team has right now, or do you think that it's going to still get caught up in the eventually kind of gummed up in the works of Ubisoft itself?
If that team has the autonomy to do what they need to do, there's still corporate politics that they have to manage, internal politics. So if Ubisoft, if they reported to, say, one executive producer or one director, and they have the freedom to make the game that they want, and of course they're still going to be bound by milestones, but I think if they have limited contact, they can achieve the agility and uniqueness that they need. But otherwise, what'll happen is, you know, they could get railroaded by internal politics and other things that take place. So it's a very publishers want to do it, but at the end of the day, you often get hamstrung by just how politics play out at a corporation. It's just, you know, if Ubi's heading down that path, Ubisoft, I give them props, but it's going to take a while before they work out the kinks and they figure it out. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at how many big names are leaving AAA development to branch out and go indie. That's probably some indication of how hand-tied that they are.
And we're actually going to get into that. It's a big topic for today, for this afternoon, tonight, this morning, wherever you are. But before we get there, this question actually goes to you, Chris. Today, you've been in the industry for a while. You've been both in the AAA scene and the indie scene. So how accessible do you think game development has become to? Maybe I need to give you a second. You good?
Sorry, guys. The
No worries.
Rugrats. Good.
It happens. Everything good? We
All
can go?
right, go ahead.
So
So
the
we're
question,
talking about.
the
go ahead.
question is, how accessible is game development to aspiring developers and entrepreneurs nowadays in comparison maybe to how it was in the last decades of the 20th century?
In the 90s, everything was proprietary. So you didn't have a lot of off-the-shelf tools like Unity or Unreal. You had to make your own tools. It was as simple as that in most cases. For example, I'll use Command and Conquer. We had to make an RTS work. You had to have specific things. Your engine had to be able to accommodate hundreds of units on screen, AI, and there weren't engines that can do that. So up until early 2000s, 2004 is when I think Unity, maybe, I can't remember exactly, but a lot of times, a lot of that technology was all hand done. Every company had their own engine that they were working from or some variant of, and it was difficult. You couldn't outsource a lot of resources, say, to other companies. You had to bring in artists most of the time and do all the art internally. At least that's how we were at Westwood and Electronic Arts. We always hired in. Rarely did we ever outsource unless it was a studio that we owned that was specifically for art or code. But as time progressed, as the engines started to develop, as Unreal and Unity started taking shape, you transitioned to like 2010, 2011 when these engines started really, they became free, easy for any developer to download and start making their tools. I mean, I look at technology today, especially Unity and Unreal. It's kind of like going to a craft store. You got you got a glue gun, you got your basic components. Now all you have to do is go to the Unity store, download the things you need, and you can make a game. If you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, you can make a game in a couple weeks. I mean, there are actually platform packs that you can download for Unity, and as long as you got you get the art, you buy the art, you can go to TurboSquid, Unity, wherever. You can download the art resources, and next thing you know, you got a game. I mean, that's as easy it is today. You can't, unlike 20 years ago, where it took weeks to get assets. It took months to get code.
Simon, you're laughing.
I am, because while I agree that the accessibility has improved no end, I think it's important to remember that making successful games is incredibly difficult and requires all of the skills and a big dollop of talent. So while it's easy to get started, to make it successful is a different matter entirely.
Well, I agree that it depends on the types of games and the level of games. If you're shooting for big AAA games, sure, it's going to require more resources and assets. But if you're an indie dev, for example, take Dust and Elysium Tale. That was done by one developer, one guy. It took him 5 years to make that game, but he managed to do it. Microsoft ended up publishing it, but an amazing experience nonetheless. Unity, there's a lot of games. You go to Steam now, you go to early access, and everybody's putting out different types of early access games. But this is just from an accessibility standpoint. Anybody can do it. Now, doing it well is another thing, and I do agree that it does take talent. It does take vision to be able to pull something off absolutely amazing, and it takes a team that can work together, collaborate together to pull something off and do it well. So even though the resources, like you're saying, even though the resources may be available, it still does take a level of talent to pull off something incredibly successful. At the same time, I will also say there is some luck involved. It is, there's a crapshoot on a lot of games. You could make this amazing game, but it might not take off. Look at Okami. You look at games like Command and Conquer, right place, right time when we hit. So there's a lot of that happens.
And then you look at Spelunky. You look at games that really don't seem like they took much of a team to make, or Minecraft for that. Games that are easily doable by one or two guys graphically, I assume. I'm not an expert, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that how graphically evolved the indie game is, and how much time and effort has been put into the shading or the storyline of. Sometimes the most basic games are a huge success nowadays.
Yeah, I would agree. There are some. There are a lot of games that you can get on Steam or even iOS, incredibly simple, fun and addictive, and for those small developers, I mean, look at Flappy Birds, right? That was you could probably do it in a day, 2 days, and hugely successful for that individual. So, but every developer, there there are games that I like to make as a developer. You know, I love survival games, and I will continue to build survival games. I love, you know, I'll build another RTS. I would love for EA to say, "Hey, Chris, want to build another Command and Conquer?" Sure, I'd love to build another Command and Conquer. You know, some of the smaller games, it just, as a developer, not my passion. I love those bigger games. But for example, in Savage Lands, we built a survival game ground up with nothing. Took us 9 months, 7 developers, and we scaled up to a couple other animators because we did all of our animations. We didn't purchase anything from the Unity store, but took us 9 months. But that was based off of talent that had more than 15 years of experience per individual. And I think that's why we were able to pull it off so quickly.
And how easy is it for developers, artists, any type of industry professional with little experience just getting started? Are there some systems well known out there, some softwares, even some websites where developers can go and connect with one another? Like, how do people form teams most of the time? Is it between friends? I know a lot of you are working between friends, I believe.
I think we've probably all got our own little stories to tell. I'm definitely not alone in terms of being in a global collaboration, or what started as a global collaboration. And it usually starts with a prototype being built and then going out on the dev forums and getting other people interested. So, I mean, that's how we started. I don't know about anybody else.
Brad?
I've most of my experience comes from working with individuals that I've met over the years on different projects. So I mean, it is a smaller, tight-knit group, but you know, I can't say that I've ventured out into forums. Now I have brought you know, people in from forums, but for the most part, when I've went to new companies or forged out a group within a publisher, it's usually within a tight, small-knit group of experienced individuals.
What about you, Brad, with a game like OOTP that has 16, 15, 14, etc., 13 years? Is that a tight-knit family that came together years ago and sticked around, or is there a lot of new people coming in or people coming out and just a very, I guess, impersonal network happening here?
No, I'd say that, you know, Marcus created the game. I mean, he just made it himself in the late 90s and put out version 1 in 1999, and you know, his inspiration were games like Football Manager, and so once he kind of put it out there, he kind of connected with people. He connected with people at SI, and then Andreas, who works with him on the game, came in a couple of years later. It's been a pretty stable team for a while. I succeeded Steve Battisti, who was the PR marketing guy before me. He was there for a while. I've been there for, you know, over 4 years now. Our graphic designer Daniela's been there for a while. We've got a pretty tight-knit team. You know, Francis, who came in to do the football game, was known to Marcus from his work on Football Manager at SI, so that helped. Matt Arnold, who came on as a programmer recently, actually came out of our forums. Jeff Riddles, who's the producer on the hockey game, came out of our forums. So pretty much, yeah, it's very much a community thing. I mean, there were people who were known to us through our community before they came on board to work for the company. So it's been pretty tight-knit, pretty small for the last few years now. And I would guess that that's probably the way a lot of these, a lot of smaller games kind of come together.
Zeno, you also because you're from Croatia, and I think in Croatia there's a pretty vibrant gaming community right there.
It is now, but unlike Simon, who has people from all over the world, we had different problem. We had 4 people that were learning and wanting to do a game, but didn't know how. And in Croatia, you do not have any type of, you didn't have so far any type of school that can teach you how to do a game, and the internet was not so accessible. Now we have a Makina, that's a game design school located in Zagreb in Croatia, and the guys, 4 of the guys, co-founders.
We lost your webcam, Zeno.
Oh, just a second.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
You had 4 people in Little Green Man Games that were just learning how to do a game through the process of making the game, and it was a success by luck, as Chris mentioned, that there is always some luck. And there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees if the game will succeed and if we will get enough budget to continue on the next project. But yes, everybody has his own story.
Where do you see Croatia moving? Do you see the Croatian movement growing?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. In '90s we have you had just Crow Team. Crow Team released Serious Sam, and it was widely known. It still is. And after them, they actually inspired young, aspiring developers in Croatia, and they assured them that there is a way to make a game, even if you're in some, I won't say third world country, but in a small country that has not a big market or anything like that. And after their success, small indie teams just starting to emerge, and you now have Gamepires, Dream Matrix, many little indie teams. And we had Reboot Develop conference in Dubrovnik about 2 months ago, and I was surprised how many teams were in Croatia that even I didn't know about. New teams, teams that are even in the process of green light on Steam or already released. So the industry is growing even in small countries like Croatia, Austria, Slovenia.
Yes. Okay, for the third question, we're going to ask you, Simon. We'd like to a little bit to cover the history of the indie scene, its boom. So this question is, what and who might have triggered, supported and facilitated the rise of the indie scene? Basically, who were the iconic figures do you think that really helped develop the movement?
Well, I mean, sure, there are individuals, but really it all stems from the internet. I mean, we're not really talking about the indie scene back in the 1990s where it was all shareware and everything. We're really talking about when the scene exploded, and really all of that stems from the internet and the advent of digital distribution and remote collaboration. So I think without Steam, the App Store, digital distributors like that, then I don't know if the indie scene would have been quite as successful as it was. I think it would probably exist through other websites, so like the developers' own websites. But the internet was everything in terms of bringing together developers and players, and that led to, that gave a direct market to developers, so they were no longer required to go through a publisher. They could essentially go straight to market, and that was a huge liberating change in the industry that really facilitated it all. And it led on to things like crowdfunding, because at the end of the day, a number of indies, or I would almost say the majority of indies, need additional funding. They're not lucky enough to necessarily have all of the funding to complete a game. And of course, recently, within the last sort of 5 years, we've seen the growth of crowdfunding, which again is brought on by the internet. Some of the other facilitators, we've touched earlier on the engine developers and the fact that prior to engines such as Unity and Unreal Engine, everything was proprietary. Everybody wrote their own engines. And that was a huge investment, and you only had a few indies that were doing it. It was only when those tools sort of enabled small teams to achieve big projects that opened up the indie scene as well. Going back to digital distribution, you've also got to factor in things like Xbox Live Arcade and PSN. I'm not having been involved in that scene. I don't know how much influence those storefronts had. I don't know if Steam was, more important in that sense.
But I would say,
sorry.
I would say that the indie scene also brought a lot of innovative ideas to gaming, gaming as a hobby. They bring new ideas every day. New games bring new concepts, new ways to have fun with a mouse and keyboard. So I guess this question is also from a creative standpoint. The people who have influenced gaming as a genre, gaming as a hobby, through the indie scene by bringing their creative qualities that perhaps would have not been welcomed on AAA studios. And that can go as far as, you know, the guys behind Hotline Miami. Stuff that you could have never sold to a big studio because they would have never taken the risk. Aren't these the people who when people think of the indie scene, a lot of people think of Hotline Miami, whether right or wrong. And I don't want to corner the conversation on that specific games, but it allows for controversies. It allows for stuff to play that a big studio wouldn't take the risk to develop. And in that sense, you have some influences in the indie scene that I think had to be highlighted. No,
I think it might open players up to the idea of exploring more indie titles, but I don't think it's necessarily that pivotal in prompting indies to enter the industry and start developing games. I think they probably do that for the passion of making games. It's a creative outlet. I don't think, well, from my own opinion, I don't think it's necessarily driven by what other people have done.
But there's innovation.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you certainly, if you want gameplay innovation and risk-taking, you need to look towards the indie scene, especially since you're having the Hollywoodization of the AAA scene.
Do you think anybody would have ever funded Minecraft in a big studio?
Good question. Maybe that's a question for Chris.
No.
Right?
There you go.
In all truth, no. Just maybe if it was, I would say if there was one publisher that might have taken a risk, it would have been Electronic Arts, but maybe Ubisoft. But in general, though, I mean, at the time, you know, when Minecraft was it came around in 2009, 2010, would have looked at it, would have looked. You know, if you look, you know, the overall presentation, like, this is kind of a kid game, open world. I don't think publishers really got the open world concept. Survival, which was that a little bit later, but I don't think they would have initially taken the risk. Now, of course, you know, it's a $1 billion empire, but yeah, early on, no, I don't think so.
What about a game like Hotline Miami, or even Hatred, more recently?
I mean, well, it depends on the studio, right? Microsoft, they have Turn 10, you know, where they wanted to compete with one of their products. Electronic Arts, I believe, Need for Speed. So again, where they wanted to compete with one of their projects, maybe 2K, possibly. I mean, Hotline, it's not a bad game at all. Again, it's just, would a publisher want to take a risk competing with big AAA franchises like Forza and Need for Speed? Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and would it fit their bottom line? Do they think they can recoup? You know, there's all that thinking and bottom line and profit and loss and all the thinking that goes into it. So maybe if they got it cheap.
Yeah, I just don't think they would. I don't think the forecast numbers are going to be big enough. I mean, I can't remember which studio it was recently, but I think they had a release and they were disappointed that, you know, they'd only sold, I don't know, $10 million gross or something like that, and that was a big disappointment for them. Well, I mean, there are a few indies that do that sort of gross revenue. Certainly, you know, some mobiles are far in excess of that. But I don't think you would necessarily know that looking at a game like Hotline Miami.
What about a game like Football Manager? And Brad, maybe you can throw some opinions into that one, because Football Manager, I believe, is a huge success. Sells tremendously well, and I don't think big studios would have anticipated such a recipe to work.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, and I want to say real quick, I appreciated the tour of Chris's house, so that was fun.
Sorry about that.
That was okay. That was cool. No worries. That was fun. I wanted, yeah, you know, it's one of the things we kind of struggle with Out of the Park Baseball is the fact that it's a text-based sim. It's not flashy graphics, and when you look at Football Manager, obviously, you know, soccer is gigantic in Europe, and it fits in with that. And we talked about that a lot internally, about the fact that in Europe, you know, Marcus has talked about the fact that management games are just very popular in Europe, and there seems to almost be kind of a mindset there that that we don't have in the U.S. I mean, I you know, when I just talk to people, like I talk to, you know, other parents at my kids' school about what we do for a living, and I talk to them about the game, and a lot of them just don't really get it. You know, they understand fantasy baseball, but they don't really understand the concept of a simulation of a management game, that kind of thing. And so I think there's a lot of education we have to do in the U.S. as far as management games go, because there's not just us. There's some other studios out there doing similar games. And so as far as Football Manager goes, yeah, I mean, they sell supposedly like 1 million copies worldwide, and I can tell you we're a tiny fraction of that. So we've got a lot of room to grow if there's that much space. But yeah, I mean, Football Manager is interesting because, you know, FIFA is a big deal, and that's kind of a very arcade-style game, and I think big publishers would assume that that's what people want, and they don't want to play something that's, you know, all about clicking on things and looking at numbers and that sort of stuff.
Okay. Zeno, you have any comments?
Well, as for who and what might have triggered the rise of the indies, well, I think that AAA industry triggered it, at least in my opinion, because we had more and more, I dare to say, soulless high-budget games, sequel after sequel, one money-milking DLC after the other, and that slowly rise to the indie scene, and the people who wanted to do something more, who were playing those games, who were not happy with those games. And there was, of course, social networking, not to forget YouTube, and how many people managed to present themselves there, and that enabled young talented people to sell themselves, their ideas and concepts to the world, and eventually get financed, published, or crowdfunded. I'm not saying that all AAA games are crap or anything. I'm playing them. But you have, as Simon mentioned, Hollywood. You have Fast and Furious 7 in Hollywood. You have Grand Theft Auto 5 in game industry, and sequels after sequels. GTA 5 is cool, but there are many games that are just getting sequel after sequel after sequel, and people got fed by it.
Especially because that's a personal opinion, but it seems that every time we get a new game, it's updated graphics, but it's the same. I mean, it's the same path. If I can quote my experience playing The Witcher, a beautiful game. I mean, amazing game. I would lie if I didn't say I'm not sinking my teeth into it pretty heavily. But there's always that little bit of disappointment in me when I attack my favorite genre, that's RPG, to see that they didn't think out of the box. It's still very much I'm gonna have a horse, I'm gonna pick alchemy and blacksmithing, and I'm gonna go after the flowers. I'm gonna do some main quests, I'm gonna do some side quests, I'm gonna fall in love, I'm gonna influence the storyline by picking my answers. It just, everything is so automated, so expected. There's always a little bit of disappointment in that. And on the other end, when I start up an indie scene, my expectations are much lower, so much lower. And yet you start to play, and it seems like a good indie game always surprises you in that way. It always surprises you in this. You can tell people have actually thought out of a new way to enjoy a game. And I think that's very true with Starpoint Gemini, with Folktale, Out of the Park Baseball, definitely. Savage Lands 2, there's innovation, I think, in my opinion, is at the heart of the indie scene, and it's pleasing. If there's a studio that I think a lot of the PC gaming community still have their hopes up for, it's Blizzard Entertainment. Here's a big studio that for a decade or two has brought nothing but innovation to its title. More worrisome, and I'd kind of like to open a parenthesis here and ask you guys what you think about Blizzard's new strategy, because as excited as everybody is to see Blizzard pop out one game after another recently, it's just been a series of announcements. Now we have our MOBA, now we have our FPS upcoming. They're good games, but I personally have a concern that they're starting to behave more and more like every other big studio. and that's by releasing stuff fast and just looking at the next title. Do you guys have any comments about that?
I don't know. Blizzard is one of the big publishers that I've got a lot of respect for. I think they've got a long history of producing very, very high quality games. I think in terms of Hearthstone, I think that was a big gamble, and look how successful that's been. That was pretty brave of them. Actually, it goes back to the small team. Talking about the small, almost indie-like teams that they have to launch that. So that was interesting. I think going back to another studio that I have a lot of respect for was Westwood. Interestingly enough, which used to play Command and Conquer quite a lot when we were developing Beasts and Bumpkins. And I mean, Westwood had a great history, but they got gobbled up, of course. I'm not sure where they got splintered up to in the end, but no, I think some studios, AAA studios, are still innovative in gameplay.
Chris, you were smirking when we were talking about Blizzard.
I've been in competition with Blizzard since the beginning of my career. So Blizzard's they do an amazing job. I mean, you gotta admit, I agree. Hearthstone, for them going outside, going outside their normal box, they did a great job with that game. Highly addicting. iOS, Android, I believe, as well as PC. It's a great product. I mean, it's a really good title. The rest of their games, they have their MMO with Warcraft, World of Warcraft, and then they have StarCraft. They do a great job within the genres that they build for, and they build for their audience. They know their audience, and they give their audience most of the time what they want. So in many ways, I mean, it's very risky for Blizzard to kind of go beyond their comfort zone, their box, because
You agree when I say that they're doing that right now?
Well, yes. So the latest, I forget the name of their kind of MOBA first-person game.
Heroes of the Storm.
Heroes of the Storm.
Well, Heroes of the Storm is, it's a good game. It's good. I played it in beta. It's a MOBA. It fits in the MOBA genre. And they have a lot of, they can pull from their IP all over. They did a great job of tying that universe and the universes all together in a way that it makes sense, and how the characters are pulled in. But they have a new kind of first-person Overwatch, yeah. So it's very similar, in concept to a game a buddy of mine worked on called Monday Night Combat. I don't know if any of you ever played it, but there's some really good ideas there. But again, that is taking them out of their comfort zone. But you look at what they tried to do back, maybe the early mid 2000s. They tried to do StarCraft Ghost. It just didn't work for them. And what they do, they killed it. Project Titan. Nobody knows what Project Titan is except for a few people. But again, that's what I like about what I like about Blizzard is that if they don't believe in something, they'll just kill it. So, they create good experiences, and that's the most important thing that works for those guys. They're really good. I know many of the developers that work on their teams. I've worked with some of those developers. I worked with the design director of StarCraft back in the days of Command and Conquer. So they build great games for their audiences. They know what they're doing. So, if they want to venture outside the box, like Hearthstone or Overwatch, that is a big risk for them. But they will continue to do what they do, and they do it really, really well, better than, in my opinion, anybody else in the industry. Okay. So I like Blizzard games. I like
your competitor.
I like what they deliver. And truthfully, for me as a developer, it gives me something. Okay, those guys are. How can I create experiences as good as as Blizzard, or as polished? Yes, it is very motivational. I look at a lot of games when I build as a developer. For example, DayZ. How can I build a game, with Savage Lands? How can we build a survival experience that goes beyond DayZ, that goes beyond the forest? What can we do that's different? So, but that's the thing about indies. We, especially independent developers, we can be that agile and we can take those risks. And for the bigger guys, they can always say, "Hey, that game looked really well. Let's pick it up or let's make our own." I mean, there's a lot of flexibility there. But personally, I wouldn't want Blizzard to change. They make great games. They know their audience, so I hope they keep on. I hope they continue on for another 40, 50 years until I'm dead.
Okay, I'm gonna skip question 4 because we very much answered it, and we still have quite a bit to go. So I'm gonna move straight to question 5, and this one goes to Simon. Do you understand the rise of the indie scene as a reaction to the quality of games being released by major studios, or on the contrary, do you believe its establishment was and remains primarily a pathway to a career at EA or Ubisoft?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it's really an issue of quality. I think it's more about gameplay innovation and, to a degree, some niche or niche, if you're in the States, some niche genres that just are no longer addressed by the big publishers. I think really the indie scene has come about because of all the facilitators that we talked about earlier, and the fact that making games is a creative process, and creative people will find an outlet for creativity no matter where it is. So I don't think it's the rise of the indie scene is necessarily a direct result of the behavior and the quality of the products of the major studios. Do I believe it's a primary path? So are indie games a primary pathway?
Basically, that most young guys start in the indie scene with high hopes of ending in a big studio. Is that, making it?
I understand that. I think it depends who you're talking about on a team. I think it's working on prestigious titles that can. It doesn't matter so much that it's a big publisher. I mean, you can get like the original Sin developer, for example. They're indie and they've got a very good reputation. And I'm sure there are lots of indies that would perhaps, in terms of the artists and people like that, would be looking quite happy working for an indie like that. So I think the days of it being exclusively a pathway to working on prestigious games, I think that's probably changing now, and it can be any company that's got a prestigious and successful title. I think if you're looking at like the game designers, then I don't think they and the people who actually start the games, making the games in the first place, I don't think they really want to work for a big publisher, because their creativity is going to be bound by marketing or whoever, by a suit at the end of the day. And I don't, it's people are coming out of AAA now. There are fewer people going into it, so no, I don't think it is.
Zeno, what are you thinking, especially as it relates to Starpunch Gemini 2? It's a game that that became popular not so long ago and could grow big, is already growing big in many ways. You've had very positive responses. The game is moving forward. You're already thinking of the next episode. You're releasing a DLC. It's got very positive reviews. So, I'm not asking you to reveal what the team spirit is as far as, I'm not even talking about selling out or getting bought out by a big studio, but it's, ambitions at the end bears no limits.
Well, yeah, I think that people who get into this industry are primarily people who, let's say, still feel their inner child, and easygoing creative people that have a dream and an idea. We had many of them regarding to space games, and we wanted to make them true. And they are definitely, we or any other team are not definitely in it just for the money or career at EA or Ubisoft or Blizzard. Of course, not everyone thinks like that, but I think that majority of indie developers look at their games as their children. Not as milking cows, and working in a small indie team can be a very rewarding process, and in comparison of maybe stressful work in huge corporation like Blizzard or Ubisoft. But Chris would know more about working in a big industry. I never worked in AAA studio.
Brad, how would you react if a major studio came and asked you for OTP's rights?
Well, that would come down to Marcus and Andreas as owners of the company.
How do you think they would react?
As far as someone, for example, wanting to buy the game to make it the franchise mode in MLB The Show or something like that, or to use that technology to kind of absorb it, or to publish the game as still continue to do it.
Well, to actually have control of the creative direction in the future.
Yeah.
To own the product.
Yeah, they're just basically they cash out and that's it. I don't know. I know Marcus has been really hoping for us to kind of sort of hit that critical mass of growth and sales. I know Football Manager kind of hit it at one point, maybe about a decade ago, and really kind of exploded. And he's hoping, I don't know if we'll ever sell Football Manager level sales, but I know he'd like to grow it. I don't know if he would. How he would feel about that. I don't know what a large publisher would really do with our game. I have a feeling that they would probably want to integrate it into an existing game. It's kind of take our AI and our technology and put it in there.
I was surprised just a couple months back, and now the name of the person evades me, but the guy behind Minecraft.
Marcus Pearson. Person.
Yeah, they bought Minecraft. Nick, do you remember who bought Minecraft? Just to Microsoft.
Microsoft.
Right?
Microsoft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Microsoft.
2.3 billion, I think.
Yeah.
So, a lot of money. A lot of money.
And he tweeted a photo of his house right in LA, the house he bought with the money.
And so he stated to the press, I had never intended for Minecraft to grow that big. That he did not anticipate that would happen, sure, but he used the word intended, I believe.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I think from a commercial point of view, you'd probably be quite silly to turn down a big pot of cash, especially, well, as long as you're not tied. I mean, they'll probably insist on non-competition or whatever, but I mean, in Notch's case, I expect he'll have a good time for a couple of years, then get bored, and he'll be back with his next project. So.
And you think he'll get back? So when he does get back, you think Notch will get back into the indie scene and start from scratch again? Because that's what gets him going.
I think so, because like we've said throughout the stream, it's an outlet for creativity, and it's where creative people congregate. And Notch is a creative person, so yeah, I think he'll get bored, and we'll see him again.
And he has the funding.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, he definitely.
Unless he's got a terrible roulette addiction.
Zeno, you say you play AAA games, so the next question applies to you. We can see Dragon Age in the back, and I think on the left side you have Far Cry. I play both those games myself as well. How and to what extent has the evolution of an indie scene influenced the modern AAA game?
Well, it's hard to answer that one, since I personally was never in the AAA industry. Chris was, nor I do have any insight in the way they think about indies. I do hope they're scared, though, as Simon said. From our perspective, I don't think they care too much about indie games as such, unless they feel threatened by a game that can be a direct competitor to their AAA title. Similar thing was with Sacred and with Blizzard's Diablo 3. Since AAA titles are more or less the same for some time now, I'm really not sure to what extent in the industry has influenced modern AAA games. Maybe it will, I'm not sure. I mean, sure, AAA titles are currently starting to go into early access, either for double charging or for really wanting to get feedback from the players. And we are witnessing AAA titles that basically look like indie games, like Journey on PlayStation, for example. But other than that, I'm not sure. I think maybe Simon, Chris, and Brett will have more insight into this.
I mean, these big studios must have people looking into the smaller games and trying to, I wouldn't say steal ideas, but
if I had to
resource.
guess. If I had to guess, if I was working at a publisher, which I have, and I worked at Microsoft, and truthfully, this mentality did come up, which was, okay, how can we have smaller teams creating more product, be more agile, and get them to market much quicker? And the way to do that is to look at how indies develop games. What tools do we need to do that? And how can we, do we need to, at the time it was, do we need to partner with, third-party, smaller third-party studios to do that? Or do we bring it internal? Of course, when you bring it internal, then it gets wrought with politics. So truthfully, a lot of it is, I know they would love to have smaller, more agile teams, but it's very difficult to do. And then you start, because what happens is then you start getting executives and shareholders, oh, look at that game. Well, it doesn't look that great. And then next thing you know, they're adding 20 more, 30 more, 40 more artists to the project. Here come 20 more coders to the project. And again, the game's pushed out for 3 more years. I mean, so I would love to see publishers get to the point where
NVIDIA needs a new driver.
Yeah. Then, I would love to see publishers get to a point where they have, 7, 10, 15-man teams, and they're cranking out, really good product. I mean, Command and Conquer was made with 20 guys. Command and Conquer Red Alert was made with 25 guys. So great games, and even when we worked on Star Wars Empire at War, was made with 20 guys, and Trials was made with like 12 guys. So these small games can be made. You can make AAA experiences with small teams. You just can't pin them down by politics and hamstring them. You have to give the teams the ability to flourish and make great product. And then it's good. Again, it's good. It's a cycle. And I think in time, publishers are going to start getting into this cycle. They're going to start bringing in more indie developers, and then these indie developers will help influence or experienced developers that have done indie development, and that'll help drive the change needed to make smaller, more agile games, but AAA products. So I don't know. We'll see. The industry is a funny place.
If I throw the Oculus into the mix, presenting it as a piece of hardware that kind of brings the two industries closer together, at least in competition for the market, do you think that's the release of this product, and should it be the success that everybody says it will be, do you think that's going to influence the way the two industries interact?
I don't think AAA will be jumping on the VR bandwagon immediately. I think they'll probably adopt a wait-and-see response. They weren't first out really into mobile, but once they saw the opportunity and they saw that the proof of concept was there in terms of businesses, they were very quick to react and then started to take the lion's share of the market.
You would say that actually they might look at the indie scene in regards to that product as their guinea pig?
I think they'll probably look at it, they'll look for commercial validation that there's an opportunity there. I don't think they'll necessarily invest a bucket load of cash in a launch title.
Brad, you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I don't know if Oculus will really take off. I'm kind of skeptical of VR, and I agree that the big publishers will probably wait and see, what happens, and if it does take off, it'll probably be some indie developer who does something unique or interesting with it that kind of gives it some traction.
So is the Oculus more for the indie scene today because the technology isn't there for the AAA to basically do what they do on this new platform?
I don't know. I don't have as much insight into the whole AAA thing as a guy like Chris might have.
So I'm actually working on an Oculus title right now, and it's an amazing piece of technology. One of the games that we're working on, it really brought it to life in how we originally visioned the franchise to be. It's actually pretty fascinating. I think early on, I'm not going to say that big publishers won't adopt it. It's a great bullet point from a marketing standpoint to put on your box. But there is some overhead to getting the technology in, and on top of that, the system requirements. A lot of publishers, a lot of games are usually built to support a wide, you got your console, but on the PC side, the technical requirements for an Oculus game they're astronomical. They're huge, and if you look at like the Steam portfolio of the users and video cards, that category is super small of individuals that have that level of processing power and GPU power to support it. So I think the indies, just independent developers, they're gonna pave the way early on, and then as those technical requirements start to diminish, then you'll start to see big publishers embrace the technology. Because
that's kind of ironic. If on one hand you're saying so to own this machine, to be able to run this machine, well, it's a small. Not a lot of people can afford it, and at the same time, it's the indie scene who's going at it. So there's some irony in that. because indie games are relatively cheaper, if I'm getting you right.
It's a new piece of technology. It's a new way to creatively express yourself in games. I mean, you look at, for example, RTS games couldn't have been made if you didn't have a mouse. When the mouse was created, that's when Dune 2, the building of a dynasty, was invented. That back to 1992. That's because of the mouse. So what'll happen is that piece of technology will inspire a new series of developers to create amazing things, and those amazing ideas will come, I think, from the indie spirit, from that audience that will embrace it early on, and then publishers will draw inspiration from that. Other teams will draw inspiration from that and embed it and integrate it into their product. So sure, you could say that the indie market is a test bed, or the indie that audience is a test bed, but really they're going to be the ones paving the way, and I think that's incredibly exciting to be ahead of the curve, ahead of the publishers making these incredible experiences before they do. Sure, there's if you're going to do it and expect millions of dollars in return, probably not. But if you can do it and create these amazing experiences that people will always, they'll look back to and make some money in the while you're doing it, then fantastic. But I do believe that there's going to be some, it's the next generation, it's the next piece of technology that's going to just create a whole new environment for us to develop in, and create brand new experiences that we haven't. Immersive experiences.
You're betting this is going to work. This is not going to be
in
like
time. Yes.
3D cinema.
I don't think it's what is the price tag is huge, and then you got to have a powerful system. Sure, I think in time it will take off, but it's going to require early adopters. I think it's going to require some good product, and if Facebook does a good job of continually pumping it and getting it out there and making it, constantly, you're reiterating the hardware so it becomes cheaper and you don't need these high-end PCs, then yeah, getting it to the mass market, ultimately getting it to the mass market is going to be the key.
Just on a note on that, recently, like within the last week, I want to say vice president, one of the higher ups at Oculus specifically said that their goal has been from the beginning that $1,500 gets the Oculus and the computer that can run it right now. So I'm not sure how accurate that is, like long term, because they say the Oculus itself is not going to change dramatically, so that as PC parts get cheaper. But that's just like a general comment about the cost part of it, because they're claiming $1,500 is enough.
I would say the most expensive piece of hardware on that whole setup is probably the GPU right now. $400 or $500 for $970, I think, which is huge. But like I said, give it time. Those requirements, the hardware will become cheaper. More people will be able to get into it, and the beauty of that is there'll be a portfolio of games, or library of games that players can go to download and play when they do adopt Oculus, and there's going to be a lot of games out there that they can try out. From AAA, I think, to the indies.
For the next question, I think we've already covered the first part, so we'll focus on the second part. What role have Valve and crowdfunding played in establishing a market to entrepreneur? But the question I'd like you to answer, Chris, is, and I know Simon has some opinions on that based on our last interview. What in your opinion are both Valve and crowdfunding's current limitations and maybe even shortcomings nowadays? We know what they offer. What are some of the issues?
So I personally don't have a lot of experience leveraging, say, Kickstarter. I do have developer friends that have put up a few Kickstarter projects. One of my buddies, he worked on Planetary Annihilation, which was a hugely successful Kickstarter, and then he did his second project, which was Human Resources. I would say now that platform, that crowdsourcing platform, has started to mature, players are becoming much more wary on what they invest in now. Truthfully, and myself. And skeptical, absolutely. Early on it was, we're going to fund this, we're going to do that. Nowadays, people are like, well, what does this offer? I think on Kickstarter, you see a lot of investors, as I like to call them. They'll give a lot of ideas a chance that first time. They'll invest in, for example, Koji Igarashi from Konami, who just did Bloodline, his latest Castlevania kind of remake. He asked for $500,000 and he got $3 million. which is huge. Where my buddy who worked on human resources, they had a great Kickstarter, but they asked for 1.4, and they only got 300,000. I mean, that goes to show you, if you go back to their original Kickstarter, for example, there were a couple things in PA that they didn't necessarily deliver on, and so the community remembered that, and I think it hurt them in the long run ultimately. So I don't know. We haven't done Kickstarter. We've been fortunate enough to actually have the funding internally to be able to fund our projects from other games that we've worked on. For example, Savage Lands was all funded through internal from revenue generated from other products. But I think that you'll see as that market matures, as Kickstarter matures, players, investors, they're just going to be more wary about what they put money into. You ask for $1.4 million, they're not going to invest in that. But you see trends where they ask for $10,000 or $100,000, and players or investors don't seem to have a problem putting money into that, which is kind of interesting. That now these smaller projects, there's just less, there's just less risk in putting money into those. I don't know. So I don't want to. The other guys may have more insight into that than I do.
But from listening to you, something interesting comes up. I would assume that when you have a publisher, if you keep him happy and you make him happy with the release of your game, he's going to be there again on your next game. Of course, if it's not a big success, that might not happen. But I mean, if the game does relatively well and the publisher, you've had a healthy relationship with him, the show goes on. But crowdfunding, you highlight the importance of having a good relationship with the people who fund you, because your next project is coming up and you're going to rely on these people again. But here you're looking at thousands of people investing in your product. So there isn't a cohesive expectation, I guess. You're never going to keep people happy. Every time I change the logo on OPN, I've got half of the officers screaming, it's awful, we hate it, and I got the other half saying, Fred, this is the best thing you've ever done. Isn't that something that might create a lot of issues in developing a game?
When you look at, it's essentially going from one publisher to another in many ways. Traditional publisher, they take on all the risk. They will fund the project, depending on what the deal is. But most of the time, they take on the risk. And what players don't see, or what gamers don't see, when a developer falls behind, a project gets late, the developer or the publisher puts more money into that project. The players aren't seeing that. Now, in the case of Kickstarter, where individuals have funded these projects, and then now they start to see development where games start to fall behind, they get upset. Why is it taking so long? In a lot of cases, you do have some developers are relatively new to creating games, so they don't necessarily properly calculate the time and the money that they're going to need to create these features. So it does make people really upset, and if they don't deliver on that, then the audience is just, it's in an uproar. And I've seen that happen on, you've seen it happen on multiple projects. They get really upset. So I don't think you can win either way.
Simon, go ahead, Zeno.
I just wanted to say that in crowdfunding is actually investing in your promises, not in the product. The product is something they would like to see, and it's a nice way to get money, but it's based on promises, your promises as a developer to the players. And the problem arises, as Chris said, if you don't fulfill those promises in a reasonable amount of time. And Star Citizen is a nice example of that. You have so many fans of Star Citizen, and it can be a huge success, and it can also be an epic fail. We will see about that, because you already have many haters that think that it will never be released, and some of them invested like thousands of dollars for some ships or whatnot. Yeah, but it's basically investing into the promises.
Simon, I know you also have some comments about that.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of experience with early access. I mean, we when it was first launched, we made the mistake of actually launching too early, and we paid a price for that, and we've been spending a lot of time recovering from that and winning back the support of those players who originally backed us. But there's a lot of trends in crowdfunding, both in terms of Kickstarter and early access, that I'm concerned about, and I'm concerned for indie developers, really, what it means. I think they really were short term. I think Kickstarter fatigue has now kicked in, and really Kickstarter now, unless you're a big name, is more of a PR exercise, because I'd say the majority of projects that we see on there now are asking for maybe like, what, 2 months of operating cash, 3 months. It's really about getting some PR exposure more than anything. So I don't think it's any longer a valid source for the majority of indies to raise funding for the games, unless they're lucky, you know, and obviously overshoot. And I think the same thing with early access as well. And I do have a big concern about that, because I think when there were a few players, you had a good chance of being able to raise most of your funding. If, like many indies, you don't have the funding in place when you launch. I mean, I think most of us would have been, you know, love to be in Chris's studio's position, but they're not. And I think that there are a lot of titles now that are launching into early access, and they've probably found that the rug has been pulled from under their feet, and their expectation of what sort of funding that might deliver into their project is going to be, you know, microscopic compared to what it was in the beginning, because you know, there have been some high-profile failed projects, and they have knocked confidence in crowdfunding, both in terms of early access and in Kickstarter, and that worries me, because it means that funding once again is going to dry up for all but very successful indies, and I'm worried that without the funding, we're going to end up back where we were in the beginning, and you're not going to have an outlet. Really, yeah, sure, you'll be able to get on Steam, but have you actually got the funding to finish your project? I don't know. It's a worrying trend that I'm concerned about, and I think we're going to see a number of an increased number of failures in both.
Early access is an interesting beast. You know, because we launched about 8 weeks ago. You know, we've had comments like, "Oh, you guys are just going to stop supporting this game. You're just another survival game that, you know." And we've worked around the clock to kind of alleviate those concerns. From, for example, you know, putting out weekly updates. Most teams put out an update every 2 weeks or maybe once a month. But, you know, we've been working incredibly hard to show the community that, no, we're not a shake and bake operation. We're here to deliver a great game. We're going to bring it to completion. Our early access timeline is 10 months. That doesn't mean we're going to have all the features in next week. So it's just, we've been constantly communicating with our user base, as well as, you know, there's going to be haters. Haters are going to hate, right? They're going to get on there and say that you guys, you know, you guys, you're just in it for the money. Two suitcases and you guys are out the door. That's not how. But the thing is, as you know, coming from AAA, one of the things, you know, I always have this drive, and so do, you know, the guys at Signal as well, the drive to create great experiences. So we are behind the game 150%, but we still have to deal with that uphill battle of those of other, you know, studios or the companies that have kind of bailed on their early access projects. So we deal with that unfortunate downfall, and it's been an uphill battle all the way. So that's that. I would say right now it's kind of a tough thing on Steam early access. You know, if you're a different type, if survival games are really brutal, because a lot of teams have done survival games. You got your DayZ, Rust, you got Ark on the horizon, you got Savage Lands. You know, we wanted to come into the whole survival genre with something different. That's why we did fantasy, and I can tell you guys, fantasy is incredibly difficult to do, because there is suddenly this MMORPG expectation for the survival genre. You know, that we're gonna pull off this game with over 100 different creatures, and it's definitely been a learning process. So, but you know, early access as a whole, it's been good. It's helped fund the game even further, continue development, and that's what I try to communicate back to the fans. Because again, I'm really transparent. Is that the money that's being put into the game or the money that's being every time a game is purchased or a product is purchased, it's actually being put back into the game. That means I can bring on another artist to help create more creatures, or another animator that can, you know, do some more animations for creatures, or a coder that can help get in more multiplayer features. It's not just, you know, us running out the door with the money. So it's been an uphill battle.
So if the system is imperfect business-wise, do you think that's because the product crowdfunding, it's new, it's brand new, it just came around? Do you think these are things that are gonna iron themselves out over time through reputation and?
Can I answer that? Yeah, I think it will mature. I think developers that are going through or have been through early access are already learning sort of the blueprint of the ideal early access experience. I think it's certainly, you want to be entering early access probably around the 70%, 75% completion point. Certainly no more than a year, and you definitely want to be putting out fortnightly patches. Now, that's not always possible. You need a good amount of funding to have a team that's capable of delivering that. And of course, it depends on the scope of what you're delivering. If you're delivering a 2D platformer, then it's going to be a lot quicker to roll out updates than if you're working on a fully rich 3D games, especially fantasy games that have a crap load of content. We know about that because we're along the same lines. So I think early access will mature, but it's sort of driven by the community, and then the long-standing and more successful indies that are in it in setting the rules in terms of rules of conduct and how a developer needs to communicate. So you are going to get slammed. If you take the money and don't communicate with your audience, you are going to get slammed. If you take too long in development, you're going to get slammed. I think after these sort of initial hiccups of people have got over that, and you're going to emerge with a much more reliable process and a maturity of developer that's going into this, then I think it may well start to recover. But I think it's definitely, we're in a bit of a lull at the moment, but I think it will pull out.
Okay, before we move on to Metacritic, I want to ask Zeno, who works with a publisher. Remind me the name of your publisher, Zeno.
Iceberg Interactive.
Iceberg Interactive. And the question is pretty simple. How tempted were you guys to get, what was the decision-making process behind choosing a publisher over the crowdfunding solution?
Well, the first Starpoint Gemini was made a few years back in, I think, 2009. And it was very hard for a creation developer team to find a publisher. I mentioned that in my interview last week. First of all, we didn't have any experience, any references, any projects behind us that will help us to find a publisher. So we accidentally stumbled upon Iceberg Interactive, which was releasing, publishing, and supporting space games at the time, and it was just a luck. And after the first Starpoint Gemini was released, it was not a good game. As I said, it was a learning process for all the guys, but it was a success. So after that, it was not a problem to sign a new deal with Iceberg and continue to work with them. And one thing about the Iceberg, we are self-published, self-financed, and Iceberg is in no way
a supportive role,
choking us in our creativity, in the ways things are done. They're just our publishers. They're the means to reach to Steam, to wider audience, and things like that. So,
do you think the crowdfunding is completely going to consume small publishers, and that small publishers are a thing of the past?
Hard to say. I think time will tell. When we entered early access, the main requirement we had was to go as unfinished as possible. That was the requirement that we got. Please, guys, give us alpha game. Give us just the proof of concept, not the finished game. And now we have seen that everybody just wants, as Simon said, 70% or more finished game. And if you just come with a proof of concept, people will think that's a scam and just drop it. So
Z1
the process of early access,
70% finished.
Well, yeah, it's not, and it's I'm not sure. The times are changing, and this was almost 2 years ago when we first entered the early access with Starpoint Gemini 2, and the people didn't expect us to give them finished game in 2 months. We had a year. We were in early access for a year before final release. And we didn't have any problems with community during that time. But today, the things are changing slowly, and you really need to have at least beta product. You cannot come with just a proof of concept and expect people to buy it and to trust you and to wait for you for a year or two.
I think you need the funding in place as well. You need to. I mean, we were lucky in that within a few days, actually, we've been in early access. We had the funding for the entire project, and just like Chris said, every additional sale now goes into a pot towards hiring additional team members. But I'm just concerned about those people that are thinking that Steam is a bit of a golden goose, if you like, and that they're looking at early access in terms of providing the funding that they need. And I think they're going to be mistaken, and that's going to lead to some problems, I think. And I'm concerned about the knock-on effect that is going to have for early access as failures continue.
What about aggregation sites such as Metacritic? I think, Brad, OOTP is rated as one of the best games in 2015 on Metacritic, so you might be the wrong guy to ask. But can you see some young studios, small studios, indie devs? How obsessed are they with Metacritic? How much sleep do you guys lose over that? And do you think it's actually a good thing for the gaming industry?
Yeah, I mean, Metacritic's pretty important to us. I mean, I always, as a PR marketing guy, I'm always focusing on making sure we get a Metacritic score for both of our games every year. And yeah, actually, an earlier version of Out of the Park that predated me is actually the #2 game of all time behind Half-Life 2, which is kind of interesting. The game has that's led to some mixed opinions, of course, as far as how people feel about that. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the Metacritic score gets pulled into Steam, and I suppose probably some other places too, so that really helps us.
I find that pretty brutal myself personally, that you would plug in the Metacritic score into Steam.
Yeah, I mean,
my personal opinion is that Metacritic does not really reflect the value of a game. I don't.
Yeah,
think...
yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, I feel pretty happy. The Out of Park 16's got a 93 score, so that helps us. You know, people see that on Steam, and it's certainly sort of a validation for the game. But I certainly understand. I know from even just looking at the sites, they add sites, they drop sites. It's not always clear which sites are always being reflected there unless you kind of keep up on it.
And I think that's a big problem. Personally, I think that's a huge problem for a young developer who's maybe in his 20s, coming up with a decent product, and it's just 5-6 guys around it, and only because a select few websites are talking about it, only maybe a couple hundred people are playing the game. They're on Steam, and they're still going to get that Metacritic score slammed onto their page. And if that Metacritic score, which perhaps on such a small pool of reviewers, testers, gamers, doesn't really reflect, I don't think it's good enough to say that's the value of the game you're buying, which is kind of the message when you slap a score onto the store page.
Yeah, I mean, Metacritic is curated. It's not every site, so there are lots of sites that I mean, we've got, I don't know, something like 50 reviews now of Out of the Park 16, including sports sites, baseball sites that we focus on, as well as some gaming sites. It's tough for us to get reviews of places like IGN and GameSpot, the bigger sites, so they're not as interested in us.
So if you get one bad score, that takes your overall score down pretty heavily.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got a 93 based on, I think it's 5 scores. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if number 6 trashes the game, then yeah, it's going to yank us down. And I can see how for a small, and for us, I mean, we're not as, it's not as big of a deal for us, I think, because we get a lot of people coming to the game through sports sites, baseball blogs, places like that cover the game. So that helps us. I think, but for someone who's putting out, let's say, a brand new 2D platform game, and you're out there on Steam and you only get a handful of reviews and a couple of them trash you, yeah, I mean, that can really sink you. So I can understand how that can be. And then where else are you going to get an outlet? You're not going to get an outlet elsewhere for reviews of your game. So that can be tough.
But you still endorse the alliance between Steam and Metacritic?
Yeah, you know, I haven't thought about it before, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Yeah.
Is it relevant? Is it as relevant, should I say, as it was before? Because it's moved quite a way below the fold in terms of a store Steam page, and I think Steam Reviews has probably taken over from it. I certainly know that. Well, if you do interact with your community on Steam, you're probably aware that quite a lot of people don't read anything below. You know, they just don't scroll down. They just look at the screenshots and watch the video, and and then look at the review score. A lot of them will not read any of the information that we put out as developers. They'll just look at it. Will they like it? Do they like it? And do the reviews look all right? That seems to be. I'm not saying all people buy games online like that, but I'd say there's a significant chunk of people that do.
Yeah. Well, fortunately for developers, today's gamers will rather watch gameplay videos for themselves than listen to any review. But even when they do, they more often read user reviews than Metacritic or some big magazines or portals. And Amazon store made a miracle with that several years ago when they introduced that user rating concept. And I think that 99% of the buyers on Amazon will read user reviews before reading even the product description, detailed product description. And consumers feel for each other and trust each other, and I think that's why. And they were scammed or ripped off too many times before, so they were lying when they were lying just on product description or an advertisement. So because let's be honest, today a review in PC Gamer or IGN, GameSpot is just a commercial, nothing more. There is no guarantee that something IGN likes will also be liked by an average PC Gamer, for example. And when that is the case, who should you trust? Yourself and your friends, gamers.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth.
I would. I'm with Zeno on this, and that when you look, Metacritic back in the 90s, late 90s, and through the 2000s, it was a great scorecard. It was also the barometer at which publishers, rated royalties for developers. I mean, if you didn't hit the 85 mark in some cases, or even 90s in some cases, those publishers would cut your royalties in half, which was unfortunate. And yeah, you get that one guy from some unknown web site that has 5 readers that gives you a 2, and suddenly your Metacritic drops to, you're down below 70. You're just kind of, you're hosed at that point.
It's not fair.
It's really not fair. And I've for a long time I've wished Metacritic would go away, but it seems to keep on ticking. I would
people
say
like that. People like to have these type of websites that bring everything together and say the holy truth.
I think it's. I mean, it. Yes. Well, you got many people, because all it is an aggregate site saying the holy truth. Which truth is actually real? I take a lot of stock in user reviews and what people are saying. At least the ones that actually are more than maybe 2 words. But on Steam, in that particular platform, you got millions of users that go in and vote up games or vote down games, and there's a lot of guys that put in time based on the time they spent playing. You get a lot of people that put in 100 hours on a game and they put up a review. There's a lot of stock, especially a positive one. I mean, there's something to be said from that. In addition to your friends playing, there's guys that are voting down games. If the game gets a negative, you look at H1Z1. It's like in the middle mixed review area, but it hasn't stopped that game from selling at all. So I mean, that game's a juggernaut. Same thing, DayZ. Yeah, DayZ is really positive, and it does really well. But H1Z1 has been in the top 10 for a very, very long time. But Metacritic, I think a lot of traditional media, like your GameSpots and your IGNs. I haven't gone to those sites in a very long time. I actually watch a lot of streams. For Savage Lands, we actually broke the traditional. We just cut traditional media out and went grassroots with a lot of the influencers. Reached out to a lot of YouTube influencers, a lot of streamers, and got and try to find ways to bring them into our beta early on to have them streaming about the game. And we found that far more effective because these individuals were talking about the game, they were streaming the game, and it really helped, spread the word of mouth on top of some other things we did with the trailer. But we found that to be really effective for a smaller indie survival game.
And if I can add, I completely agree with that, because as a young gaming website that we are, just getting established, getting things moving forward, when we reach out to developers and we ask for a press copy of the game so that we can review it, a lot of of course, the smaller studios come back to us and say, do you also want keys for your streamers? They'll even come to us and ask us, do you have a streaming department? Get your people playing our game. Like, it's something well respected in the community. I think streaming as a platform to review games almost.
It's a lot of streaming is really raw compared to if a lot of the more higher profile sites. They're very scripted in some ways. Where you watch streaming, it's very raw. You get to the nitty gritty. A lot of streamers say what they feel, and I actually love that as a developer. True. I'll watch a stream and he'll say something about a bug, and I'll just kind of like, oh God, why didn't I just get that? Or I'll fix that. I'll go right into because I actually have a project on my home machine as well. I'll go right in and I'll fix whatever it is right away, or I'll tweak something. It's great. I love those streams, and I love really have come to respect and appreciate all the influencers out there that are working really hard to stream the game. I will go on a stream and talk with influencers any time of the day, be it 3 in the morning or in the middle of the day. I don't mind. I really enjoy doing it, and I enjoy playing the game with a lot of influencers as well to give them kind of a rundown of how the product goes. I think this is the new kind of generation of media. This is where media is going for the future, and I think it's really important, especially for indies, to embrace it and work with the streamers and bring them in. Streamers love being part of the process too. They love being in there. They love hanging out with developers. It's a really cool thing because you think about it, a lot of these guys are just gamers. They're not they don't go to the high profile publisher paid events that get schmoozed. These guys are just playing games and streaming and talking about it. And granted, a lot of them have more subscriptions than a lot of the high profile media sites, but you look at Total Biscuit, for example. But nonetheless, it's a cool form of media, and I fully embrace it. And will continue to embrace it for every product that I build going forward, and every marketing and PR campaign that we build will be built around. The influence will be a core part of that experience.
Yeah, it is an integral part of development now, especially if you're in early access. I mean, you get so much feedback, and you learn. All the sticking points that normally you would have a testing department doing that if you were working for a big publisher. But I think it's essential. It's like you say, I don't read reviews of games anymore. I just pretty much go and I'll catch them in stream or a YouTube Let's Play video, and it's very raw and it's very honest.
Yeah.
I'm glad that on this first roundtable, and thank you guys for coming on board and joining us. I'm glad that I think the common thread that's kind of united or brought together all those topics is the connection between the indie developers and the gamers. It's really at heart of almost all of the dynamics at play here, from the ones that are generated through softwares like Valve and and even websites like Metacritic, all the way to Twitch, gamer interaction, and you guys being so responsive. I mean, I think that the 4 of you, we invited you 2 weeks ago, none of you hesitated, all of you immediately replied. You knew that we don't have tens of thousands of people on our Twitch channel, that we're just getting started, but you're supporting the mission, you're supporting the gaming community that plays you, no matter how big they are. And I think that's a huge compliment, because it's so hard to find in the business world, outside of gaming as well. I think across lands, across nations, you're not gonna find that mentality to go running around the streets. But that leads me to a concern that I think is worth closing on. And if you're so connected to the community, if you have such a strong tie and that's so important to the development of games, doesn't in some way take us away from, I hate to say, the philosophical foundation behind the indie scene, which is the ability for artists and developers, industry professional, musicians, you name it, to create exactly the games they want to play? Aren't you also finding yourself, as the industry evolves, more and more tied to mainstream demand. You're constantly fine-tuning your game to what people want.
I think it's just part of commercial reality for any developer, you know, that has got a payroll to meet. I think it's important to make sure that your creative vision remains intact, but you've also got to listen. You're going to make mistakes, and as soon as you find out what those mistakes are by your community telling you, then you're going to end up making a better game as a result of it, and that's again going to lead to better, you know, more commercial success.
You don't feel forced to build something you don't want to build. That does not happen in the indie scene.
So, if I can use Savage Lands for example, you know, when we set out to create it, I created a plan, you know, game design, vision for the product, core pillars for the product, what the game, you know, fantasy, brutal, and made sure that when we launched, it embodied all of these. I was the only designer on the project, so for me, getting it out there and getting more players playing and seeing what they really enjoy about the game, I hit the vision that I wanted, you know, that we wanted for the product. So we got it out there, but I needed more design resources to help me kind of, you know, see out or fill out these ideas. You know, I didn't mind having more players saying, you know, this is a okay idea, but what do you think about this? And it sounded good. You know, in many ways, what I love about early access and indie development is I get to, you know, you get to work with players that are really enjoying the experience and build stuff that they want. Now, in some cases there are certain elements, like I want to still adhere to certain, like for example, the whole brutal aspect of Savage Lands. I still want to adhere to that, but we can still come up with ideas that fit within the world. And there's a lot of people out there that have great ideas, and if they enjoy your product, they put the money, you know, they put money in. So why not let them have a voice? The times have changed. We're not in the 90s or early 2000s anymore. If you want to make great games and you want a community surrounding that game, you got to interact with the community. Otherwise, you know, you put out another game, they're going to remember, oh, those guys were a bunch of jerks. They never listened to anything, and all they wanted was money. Now, times have changed, in my opinion. So I believe in crowdsourcing design, and you can make great things as long as there's somebody at the helm steering the vision. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Some closing comments on that, Zeno?
Yeah, well, just because we made the game we want to play, it doesn't mean we want to do it alone. And that's why we have early access, for example, and you have nice examples at this very table. I mean, Starpoint Gemini 2 was in a really successful early access. Folktale and Savage Lands still are. And they're also getting positive suggestions and feedback from the players. And making a game alone in your vision is fine, but doing it with the help of so many positive and creative people all over the world, that's something truly beautiful. And I think that is the foundation for building mutual respect and understanding between gamers and indie developers in the future.
Wonderful. Brad, I just yesterday I was checking out a tweet from Out of the Park Baseball. I think you guys were being pressured from the community to release something. You guys are very much also in touch with your community, and still the game's released and you're still working for them, aren't you?
Yeah, we just put out our 5th update to the game on Monday, on Memorial Day, and we'll have another update. I think Marcus said it would be in July. Well, he usually puts out several updates every year. He listens to people. He not only fixes bugs, but he adds little features, little things. So that's really important.
That's something you guys welcome.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we want that. He wants that. I mean, the game reflects Marcus's vision. Sometimes people will want something and he'll say, no, I don't want that in the game. But he will listen to people and will certainly put things in. I've even made suggestions to him. So he's happy to hear those things.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I think we took too much of your time. We promised we'd be done in under than 90 minutes. We took a little bit more than that, but we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. Thank you for making our Sunday very special here at OPN. We'll be publishing this interview within the next 24 hours. We'll send you the link, and we hope to stay in touch and in good relations. We hope to succeed as well. We're working hard. We're bringing people together. Not every day is easy, but we're trying to build several departments that help us interact with the guys who are building the games we love. That's our mission statement. So hopefully we grow into something half as good as what you guys have already produced. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Best of luck, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.